June 6, 1944. Utah Beach, Normandy. 5:47 a.m. The first landing craft scrape against the sand. Ramps drop. American soldiers pour onto the beach. Among them is Private First Class James Rencher. He is not carrying a rifle. He is carrying a metal detector. His job is to find what the Germans have buried beneath the sand. And there is a lot buried in the sand. Rencher kneels in the wet ground, headphones pressed tight against his ears. The detector hums a steady tone. Then the pitch changes. The dial twitches. Another one. Somewhere beneath his boots sits a steel cylinder, the size of a coffee can, buried just inches below the surface, completely invisible. If he takes one more step, a pressure fuse will register the weight of his body. A small click will echo through the mechanism, and a timer will start. 4 seconds, that is all he will have. But 4 seconds is not enough to run. It is not enough to dive for cover. It is barely enough to understand what is about to happen. A small propellant charge will ignite. The cylinder will launch out of the ground. It will rise to exactly waist height, 1 meter above the sand. And then it will detonate. 360 steel balls will tear through everything within 20 meters. Not downward like a normal mine, outward in every direction. At waist height. The Germans called it the shrapnel mine, the S mine. American GIS gave it a different name, a name that would echo through military history for decades. They called it the Bouncing Betty. Over 10 years, Germany produced nearly 2 million of these weapons. They were buried on beaches, in forests, along roads, in fields that looked completely empty. Lieutenant Colonel C.E.E. Sloan, a British military engineer, studied the weapon extensively after the war. His conclusion was direct. He called it probably the most feared device encountered by Allied troops in the war. Not tanks, not artillery, not machine guns. A steel cylinder weighing less than 9 pounds. This is the story of how that cylinder changed infantry warfare forever. Germany needed a new kind of weapon. In 1935, Germany was surrounded by potential enemies. France to the west, Poland to the east, Czechoslovakia to the south, the Soviet Union looming beyond. German military planners understood what this meant. Any future war would mean fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. The Wehrmacht could not be everywhere at once. They needed force multipliers, defensive barriers that required minimal manpower, a way to slow enemy advances without stationing entire divisions along every border. Mines were an obvious solution, but traditional mines had a critical limitation. A standard anti-personnel mine detonated directly beneath the victim's foot. The blast travelled upward, through the leg, into the body. Devastating for the individual soldier, but tactically inefficient. One mine, one casualty. The soldier behind him would see what happened. He would stop. He would find another path. German engineers asked a different question, a more ambitious question. What if a single mine could kill not just one soldier, but an entire squad? What if the blast could reach outward instead of upward? What if the killing radius could extend 20 meters in every direction? The answer would take years to develop, but when it was finished, it would terrorize every army that faced it. If you are interested in the weapons that shaped World War II, consider subscribing. We cover the most feared and ingenious weapons of the Axis powers. New videos every week. How German engineers solved the problem. Development began in the early 1930s. The exact timeline remains unclear. German military records from this period are incomplete. The specific engineers who designed the S-mine remain anonymous. They left no memoirs, no interviews, no photographs. What they left was a weapon of remarkable elegance. Simple in concept, devastating in execution. The first production model entered service in 1935. It was designated the SMI-35, Shrapnel Mine 1935, a steel cylinder, 15 centimeters tall, 10 centimeters in diameter, about the size of a large soup can. The total weight was 4 kilograms, just under 9 pounds. Light enough for a single soldier to carry several. Light enough to be deployed by the thousands. Inside the cylinder sat the explosive charge, 182 grams of TNT. Not a large amount by military standards, but the explosive was not the primary killing mechanism. Surrounding the explosive core were 360 steel balls, each one approximately 9 millimeters in diameter. Each one machined to precise specifications, each one designed to kill. At the base of the cylinder sat a small charge of black powder. This was the propellant, the component that gave the S-mine its terrible reputation, the component that made it different from every mine that came before. A three-pronged pressure fuse protruded from the top. Any weight greater than 7 kilograms would push the prongs down, heavy enough to ignore small animals, light enough to catch any human footstep. Soldiers could also attach tripwires to the fuse mechanism. Thin wires stretched across paths and doorways, creating invisible barriers that required no soldier to guard them. When triggered, the sequence was devastatingly quick. The pressure fuse activated a percussion cap. The percussion cap ignited the black powder propellant. The mine launched upward, trailing a thin wire connected to the detonator. After rising to approximately 1 meter, the wire pulled taut. The tension triggered the detonator and the main charge fired. 360 steel balls exploded outward in every direction. The time between the initial trigger and the main detonation was approximately 4 seconds. Long enough for a soldier to hear the pop of the propellant. Long enough to understand what was happening. Not long enough to escape. The numbers tell the story. The lethal radius was 20 meters. Within this zone, the 360 steel balls, traveling at high velocity, would kill any unprotected infantry. No cover, no defense. The casualty radius was 100 meters. At this distance, the steel balls could still wound, still maim, still take a soldier out of the fight. American training manuals warned of potential injuries up to 140 meters from detonation. The detonation height was not arbitrary. German engineers had calculated the optimal position. At waist height, the steel balls traveled in a nearly flat plane, parallel to the ground. This meant they would pass through a standing soldier at the most vulnerable parts of his body, the abdomen, the pelvis, the upper thighs. American medical personnel documented the characteristic wound patterns. They were distinctive, horrific. Survivors often faced multiple amputations. Between 1935 and 1945, German factories produced 1.93 million S-mines, nearly 2 million individual weapons, each one capable of killing a squad, each one buried somewhere in Europe or North Africa, waiting. First blood in the Saar. The S-mine's first combat test came in September 1939. It was the opening weeks of the Second World War. France had declared war on Germany. The French army was not ready for a full offensive. Instead, they launched limited probing attacks into the Saar region, German territory along the French border. French commanders expected resistance, expected defensive positions. They did not expect the fields ahead to come alive with explosions, fields that appeared empty, fields with no visible enemy, fields that killed anyone who stepped into them. The S-mine proved so effective that the French Saar offensive was abandoned within days. The troops withdrew. The mines had done their job. French soldiers gave the weapon a nickname. They called it le soldat silencieux, the silent soldier. It needed no food, no ammunition resupply, no sleep. It simply waited. Rommel's Devil's Gardens. The weapon's true potential emerged 3 years later in the deserts of North Africa. El Alamein, 1942. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel faced a strategic nightmare. His Africa course was outgunned. The British had more tanks, more aircraft, more supplies. Fuel was critically short. Mobile defense was impossible. Rommel could not maneuver. He could not attack. He could only hold. So he built something else, something that did not require fuel, something that did not require soldiers to man it. He called them Teufelsgarten, Devil's Gardens. His engineers worked for months. They laid approximately 500,000 mines across the desert, S-mines, anti-tank mines, booby traps, all mixed together in elaborate patterns. The minefield stretched 8 kilometers deep in some sectors. When British forces finally attacked in October 1942, the breakthrough was agonizing. Specialized mine-clearing tanks led the assault. Engineers followed with metal detectors and prodding tools. Progress was measured in meters per hour. The battle lasted 12 days. Rommel lost. But the Devil's Gardens had demonstrated what mass mine deployment could achieve. By 1944, the S-mine became central to Germany's last major defensive effort. The Atlantic Wall stretched for thousands of kilometers along the coast of France. Rommel, now commanding the defense, knew the fortifications alone were not enough. He ordered mines laid in unprecedented quantities. He said they were sown like grass seed. On D-Day, the 4th Infantry Division landed at Utah Beach. Their after-action report noted that casualties were light compared to Omaha, but the report also recorded something else. Most casualties came from mines, not enemy fire. After the invasion, Allied engineers began the long process of clearing the beaches. Near Pupperville alone, they removed an estimated 15,000 mines. One small sector, one beach. The S-mine's physical effects were devastating. Its psychological effects may have been worse. Traditional combat offers certain psychological anchors. You can see the enemy. You can shoot back. You can take cover. Mines offered none of this. There was no warning, no sound before the trigger, no muzzle flash, no enemy position to assault. Just empty ground that might kill you or might not. Soldiers advancing through suspected minefields experienced constant hypervigilance. Every step became a calculation. Every patch of disturbed earth became a potential death sentence. The 4-second delay added a unique psychological horror. Soldiers who heard the distinctive pop of the propellant charge knew exactly what was coming. They had just enough time to understand, not enough time to escape. Some men froze, some ran, some threw themselves flat on the ground. None of these responses reliably saved lives. Every major power copied it. The highest compliment in weapons design is imitation. After the war ended, captured S-mines were shipped to Allied research facilities. American engineers took them apart and studied every component. Then they built their own. The result was the M16 mine, almost identical in concept. It remained in American military inventory for decades. The Soviet Union developed the OZM series along similar principles. Finland had purchased S-mines directly from Germany during the war. Finnish soldiers nicknamed them Hippie Heikki, which means Jumping Henry. Today, bounding fragmentation mines remain in military arsenals worldwide. The fundamental concept has proven impossible to improve upon. The mines are still waiting. The S-mines story did not end in 1945. In Egypt's western desert, an estimated 16 million unexploded mines still contaminate the landscape. 80 years after El Alamein. Egyptian military engineers continue clearance operations to this day. Some of those mines are S-mines. German steel cylinders buried in the sand since 1942. Their casings corroded by decades of desert wind. Their fuses potentially still functional. German documentation indicated an expected operational lifespan of 2 to 7 years. The explosives inside remain viable indefinitely. June 6, 1944. Utah Beach. Private Wrencher marks another mine for the clearance team behind him. One more steel cylinder located. One more bouncing Betty that will not kill anyone today. The S-mine never decided the outcome of a major battle. It was never designed to. It was designed to slow advances, to inflict casualties, to break morale, to make soldiers afraid of empty fields. By those measures, it was among the most effective weapons of the Second World War. Nearly 2 million were produced, deployed on every front where Germany fought, copied by every major military power. A steel cylinder weighing less than 9 pounds, 360 steel balls, 4 seconds of warning. The silent soldier that made Allied infantry fear every step across open ground. That was German engineering.